Welcome to Scriptural Science, a presentation of Truth and Life Institute, Boston, Massachusetts, and Oba, Nigeria. The following is a subsection of the book, What is the Truth? Written and published by Ifeanyi Chukwujima, scriptural scientist and a servant of God. This subsection's ID is What is the Truth 4:1. Creation according to God. God started the creation story with the earth sitting inside the water in the hollow of God's hand to dismiss all doubts about what was first and what wasn't. God also listed all the creation activities within each day. He completed them to make sure that no one rearranges the sequence of the events of creation. In the very beginning, there was God sitting majestically on his throne in heaven, Psalms 47 verse 8, and Revelation 7 verse 15, with water in the hollow of God's mighty hand. The formless earth was sizzling inside the water in the hollow of God's mighty hand, generating thick, dark coverage of vapor that wholly encapsulated the water and the mass of earth inside the water. The Bible tells us that the water and the earth inside the water were both suspended over nothing, Job 26 verse 7, in the hollow of God's mighty hand. And we learned from Genesis 1 verse 2 that the Spirit of God was hovering over the water of creation. Here is that passage from the Bible. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, Genesis 1 verse 2. In essence, the Spirit of God, strong orbital forces, suspended the water and the earth inside the water over the hollow of God's hand. And the Spirit of God, gravity, held the earth and the water together so that the earth remained completely submersed inside the water. And the Spirit of God, electromagnetic forces, held the constituent materials together in their types. The Spirit of God, weaker forces, bound the disparate materials together in amalgamation to form blocks of natural entities that constantly fall apart and get reassembled into newer natural entities as the Spirit of God operates through God's creations to achieve God's purposes. In summation, all the forces of nature known to man are each a discrete force carved out of the Spirit of God, set criteria for by the Spirit of God, perfected by the Spirit of God, and continually employed by God to achieve God's express desires. Here is what science says about the different forces of nature, taken from http://cscp10.phys.utk.edu/ast162/lect/cosmology/force s.html/https.html. The fundamental forces of nature. There are 4 fundamental forces that have been identified. In our present universe, they have rather different properties. Properties of the fundamental forces. The strong interaction is very strong, but very short-ranged. It acts only over ranges of order 1013 centimeters and is responsible for holding the nuclei of atoms together. It is basically attractive, but can be effectively repulsive in some circumstances. The electromagnetic force causes electric and magnetic effects, such as the repulsion between electrical charges or the interaction of bar magnets. It is long-ranged, but much weaker than the strong force. It can be attractive or repulsive and acts only between pieces of matter carrying electrical charge. The weak force is responsible for radioactive decay and neutrino interactions. It has a very short range and, as its name indicates, it is very weak. The gravitational force is weak, but very long-ranged. Furthermore, it is always attractive and acts between any 2 pieces of matter in the universe since mass is its source. The 4 fundamental forces all play central roles in making the universe what it is today, but with respect to the large-scale issues that are of interest to cosmology, it is gravitation that is most important. This is because of 2 of its basic properties that set it apart from the other forces. 1, it is long-ranged and thus can act over cosmological distances, and 2, it always supplies an attractive force between any 2 pieces of matter in the universe. Thus, although gravitation is extremely weak, it always wins over cosmological distances and therefore is the most important force for the understanding of the large scale structure and evolution of the universe. Unification of the forces of nature. Although the above discussion indicates that the fundamental forces in our present universe are distinct and have very different characteristics, the current thinking in theoretical physics is that this was not always so. There is a rather strong belief, although it is yet to be confirmed experimentally, that in the very early universe, when temperatures were very high compared with today, the weak, electromagnetic, and strong forces were unified into a single force. Only when the temperature dropped did these forces separate from each other, with the strong force separating first, and then at a still lower temperature the electromagnetic and weak forces separating to leave us with the four distinct forces that we see in our present universe. The process of the forces separating from each other is called spontaneous symmetry breaking. There is further speculation, which is even less firm than that above, that at even higher temperatures, the Planck scale, all four forces were unified into a single force. Then, as the temperature dropped, gravitation separated first, and then the other three forces separated as described above. The time and temperature scales for this proposed sequential loss of unification are illustrated in the following table. Theories that postulate the unification of the strong, weak, and electromagnetic forces are called grand unified theories, often known by the acronym GUTS. Theories that add gravity to the mix and try to unify all four fundamental forces into a single force are called superunified theories. The theory that describes the unified electromagnetic and weak interactions is called the standard electroweak theory, or sometimes just the standard model. Grand unified and superunified theories remain theoretical speculations that are as yet unproven, but there is strong experimental evidence for the unification of the electromagnetic and weak interactions in the standard electroweak theory. Furthermore, although GUTS are not proven experimentally, there is strong circumstantial evidence to suggest that a theory at least like a grand unified theory is required to make sense of the universe. http://cSCP10.utk.edu/ASTR162/lect/cosmology/for-ces.html http. Science speculates about things on Earth and in the universe. The Bible, on the other hand, authoritatively states the absolute truth about all things everywhere. However, erroneous assumptions made by the Church in the middle age got the Church to agree with most of the world's views on the Earth and the universe, in contradiction to the clear evidence God posited in the Bible for the Church. This falling away of the Church from the authoritative truths of the Bible was prophesied in the Bible. Science has put mankind in blind pursuit of worldly knowledge to the exclusion of everything God, in support of governmental efforts around the world to eliminate God from the human psyche, to the peril of mankind. Here is that passage from the Bible. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. 12 It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. 13 And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. 14 Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. 15 The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. 16 It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads. 17 So that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. 18 This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Revelation 13 verses 11 to 18. We learned from the Bible that God is light and there is no darkness in him whatsoever. 1 John 1 verse 5. Why then would God start the earth out filled with darkness? Everything God does have meaning beyond human comprehension. Therefore, for God, who has no darkness in him whatsoever, to start the world with darkness speaks volumes. There was infinite space between the water in the hollow of God's hand and the space between God and the hollow of his hand. That is more than enough space to dissipate the vapor that rose from the quenching of the much smaller molten mass of earth in the water in the hollow of God's hand. But God chose to concentrate the vapor that rose from the quenching of earth right around the water in the hollow of his hand until it became pitch black and created darkness over the water and the submersed earth. The darkness that covered the water and the earth in Genesis 1 verse 2 was symbolic of the darkness of the heart that would soon overtake mankind, because God created the earth for the benefit of mankind. That darkness of the heart would come from the devil. At this point in God's creation, there was heaven, God's dwelling place, and the earth sizzling inside the water in the hollow of God's hand. This is the state of things recorded on Genesis 1 verse 2. Only grace creates and maintains perpetuity because grace saturates all of God's creations, traveling through all things at the speed of God and reinforcing and reinvigorating all of God's creations. The perishable can never sustain perpetuity because the temporary can never create permanence. The devil had landed on the earth after the devil was kicked out of heaven. God had reserved the red-hot core of the earth as the devil's destination. Therefore, the devil was on the earth, a step closer to his ultimate fiery abode. See the following passage from the Bible: "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations." Isaiah 14 verse 12. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north. Isaiah 14 verse 13, KJV. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. 15. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. Isaiah 14 verses 14 to 15. Those who see you stare at you, they ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble? 17. The man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let his captives go home. Isaiah 14 verses 16 to 17. When God cast the devil out of heaven, the only other place the beast could go was the earth, which was submersed inside the water in the hollow of God's mighty hand. The cooling by the water created a solid crust all around the submersed earth, with the core of the earth still red-hot and churning violently. God designed this fiery core as the devil's final destination through eternity. The solidified crust on the surface of the submersed earth became the earth's seabeds. See Figure 2 below for illustrations. Figure 1. The original configuration of everything before the creation account in Genesis chapter 1. There was heaven and there was the earth submersed inside the water in the hollow of God's mighty hand. At this point in creation, there was our infinite God on his holy and majestic throne in heaven, with the heavenly hosts attending to him 24/7. And the heavenly hosts spread out across the landscape of heaven. There was water in the hollow of God's mighty hand. And there was this blob of shapeless mass, the earth, submersed inside that water in the hollow of God's hand. And this mass was turning mad because it was an eternal volcano, created as the devil's eternal home, because the devil had entertained wicked thoughts against God Almighty. Isaiah 14 verses 13 to 14. God cooled off the crust of this volcanic blob and later caused land to project from the blob above the surface of the water so that God could put the humans on the land, reserving the blazing core of it for the devil and all the enemies of God. The thick dark vapor from the quenching of the earth's submersed surface through the surface of the water and the earth into thick darkness. This was the starting point, Genesis 1 verse 2, in God's narrative about his creation activities. And because the earth's surface and the surface of the water surrounding the earth is in pitch darkness, God called for light to pierce through. That darkness and light up the earth and the water. Genesis 1 verse 3. And light cut through the darkness, which promptly receded to one half of the sphere that is the earth, and its water covering. That light came directly from God Himself, the great God who is all light. 1 John 1 verse 5. This is exactly what John 1 verses 1 to 5 was talking about. That light that cut through the darkness over the surface of the earth and the water was Jesus, Christ the Son of God, who was there in the beginning with God. Through Him and for Him, everything that was created was created. Jesus Christ came onto the earth at Genesis 1 verse 3, and the devil was pushed out of one half of the earth's surface and continued to be chased around by the light day after day. Therefore, from that first impingement of light on the surface of the water and of the earth, the world had been split between light and darkness and between good and evil. Yet, when God created mankind on day 6 of creation, God was sure to make all evil inert to mankind so that mankind would be free from sinful nature. God gave mankind one simple command to get mankind to maintain the discipline required to justify the freedom mankind was given as dictated by love. Here is that single command of God to mankind. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden. 17, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it you will certainly die. Genesis 2 verses 16 to 17. The appearance of light on the earth caused the earth to rotate so that every part of the earth's surface would see the light within every 24-hour period. The Bible also told us that God spreads out the northern sky over empty space, Job 26 verse 7. Since the earth is spherical in shape, everywhere you are on the earth has a northern sky. This passage then translates to God spreading out the sky uniformly across the face of the sphere that is our earth. And Genesis 1 verses 6 to 8 told us that God created our space and separated waters from waters. Here is that passage. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." 7 And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. 8 And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Genesis 1 verses 6 to 8 KJV. God introduced space all around the sphere that is our earth and uniformly pushed the space away from the earth to put distance between the surface of the earth and the water remaining over the face of the earth. And the water God was pushing away from the face of the earth, which was atop the newly created space. This water God pushed out of space remains outside space today. That is the crystal clear water of heaven which the Bible mentioned a few times. See Figure 3 below. Ionization of atmospheric gases started after the creation of space on day 2. And the Earth's atmosphere was stratified by God, perfected and sealed off from the rest of space before the Big Bang occurred on day 4 of creation. It can be observed from Genesis 1 verses 6 to 8 that God spent the entire second day of creation on the development of space and all its properties, including orbital configurations, orbital speeds, and orbital orientations. On this second day of creation, God mapped out space and made allocations for stellar and planetary placements and distributions, stellar configurations and motions and interrelations. Slots for all the various galaxies were designated, set, and perfected in preparation for the Big Bang that was to come on day 4 of creation. On day 3 of creation, at God's command, an unprecedented volcanic eruption parted the still waters that held the earth, creating a huge landmass out of the water, triggering huge tsunamis that clapped violently over the new landmass, cooling the landmass and weathering it. Figure 2. The circles of life, not drawn to proportion. This is the final configuration of heaven, the universe, the earth, and hell, after God created everything. First, there was God sitting majestically on his holy throne in heaven, with the earth submersed in the water in the hollow of God's mighty hand. Then God started his creations as detailed in Genesis chapter 1, by first making light appear on the surface of the earth to push the darkness on the surface to one side and chase the darkness around throughout each day. Then God created our expansive space over the earth and pushed water out of space as he stretched out space and left some water on the surface of the earth to become earth seas. Then God created land out of the earth seas, cooled and weathered the land, and planted green vegetation of the land. Then God caused a cataclysmic explosion that created our sun, moon, and stars, and every other celestial body in the universe, and populated space with all of them. Then God created sea creatures and flying creatures. And God created land creatures and finally mankind. Then God rested. Huge reservoirs of water were trapped inside the new landmass as the volcano jetted through the water and cooled. These reservoirs opened up into rivers, lakes, and ponds later that day to provide potable water for mankind and the animals. And God put green vegetation on the land, supported by the light that dawned on the earth on day one of creation, the ionized gases that formed the Earth's atmosphere, water from the rivers and lakes, and nutrition from the new Earth's crust. At God's command on day 4 of creation, a cataclysmic explosion rocked the Earth and reverberated across the empty space that surrounds the Earth, creating oceans of fires and radiant energies that raced across space at the speed of God, and dispersed throughout space to form the universe, with the Spirit of God completely shielding the fragile Earth's ecosystem and atmosphere from the unprecedented explosion. It should be noted here that God did not leave his throne to accomplish any of these. All of the creation events and activities were accomplished by God, on the palm of God, while God was comfortably seated on his throne in heaven. See Figure 4 below. As expansive and as awe-inspiring as space and our universe are, that entire expanse fits into the palm of God and is suspended over God's palm by the Spirit of God. God sat at his throne and accomplished all he wanted to accomplish. And it was all perfectly done. Day 4 of creation was the beginning of a new age on the earth. While day 1 through day 3 had God directly supplying his light to the earth, day 4 through the end of time will have the sun replace God's direct light on the earth. Figure 3. The entire universe fits into God's mighty hand and rotate before God. It is human ignorance that made the world scientists think that they could figure out how the earth and the universe started without full acknowledgement of God. Nobody who disrespects God ever gains glory from God. God declared in the Bible that human wisdom is foolishness to God. What they think they know is simply wishful thinking. The real knowledge can only be found in the Bible through faith. God's questioning of Job clearly shows that unless you have faith in God and trust in God's word, you can never get to the truth of anything God did way before you were born. Everything the world scientists have concocted and fed to the world about the origin of the earth and the universe is mere science fiction. They have been looking at the whole thing backwards. They have been playing mind games and high-fiving one another and spreading lies and innuendos about God and his creations. They have been spewing lies everywhere, pocketing great fortunes and basking in endless popularity. They have the support and sponsorship of powerful world governments, backed by the people's collective wealth. But they have all got it wrong. Here is the passage from Job. What is the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? 20, can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? 21, surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. Job 38 verses 19 to 21. What the underlined portion of the preceding passage is saying is that unless you personally witness something, whatever explanation you come up with could be all lies. If you did not personally witness the event, you must base your investigation on a reliable source for you to begin to make sense of any such event. And what source anywhere in the universe is more reliable than the very words of the Creator who put these things together in the first place? Worldly knowledge continues to be mankind's greatest liability. Instead of allowing our minds to be enlightened by knowledge, we continue to let knowledge ruin our lives. Any knowledge that ruins anyone's chance of salvation is not knowledge, but a seed of the devil. The devil has been doing this to mankind since Adam and Eve. The devil always finds a way to tell mankind something that is contrary to what God has told mankind. And like my 17-year-old son told me, when the devil tells us these things, he makes us believe that we came up with them ourselves, so we could pat ourselves on the back and add to our feeling of self-importance. Every account of creation out there that is contradictory to the very simple and straightforward account of creation in the book of Genesis is an innuendo and a flat-out lie. The so-called origin scientists are basing their theories on assumptions, endless extrapolations, and billions of years of formation. But in truth, the world had been through different stages of existence over relatively short periods of time, because its architect and builder is the master of perfection. The first 3 days of creation is very different from day 4 of creation onwards. Day 1 through day 3 of creation constituted the first stage of the earth. From day 1 to day 3 of creation, the only thing standing between the earth and God is the water in the hollow of God's hand. And that water is crystal clear and would not have obstructed anyone's view. But God chose to allow the vapor that rose from the quenching of the volcanic mass that was the earth in the water in the hollow of his hand to concentrate into a thick dark cloud that blanketed the entire surface of the water and cut off God's light from the earth and the water. This was symbolic of the presence of the devil on the earth at that point. The devil had been kicked out of heaven and had landed on the earth, whose extremely hot and violently churning core was reserved for the devil as a destination. God then called for light on the earth, and God's direct light cut through the darkness and pushed the darkness to one half of the earth. The appearance of God's direct light on the earth caused the earth to rotate so that every portion of the planet would see God's direct light within each 24-hour period. The very instance of the first impingement of God's direct light on the face of the earth was high noon. Evening rolled in, followed by nighttime. And the morning closes out the day and leads to the next high noon. That is why the Bible concluded each day of creation with the following statement, and there was evening, and there was morning. Everything God does, the world does in reverse. God, who created everything, started counting time from high noon, beginning every day at noon and ending every day at noon. But the world changed the day to start at midnight and end at midnight, because the world believes that it knows better than God. The world scientists claim that their knowledge is more precise than the information in the Bible. Is it really? Who is scientifically accurate in the counting of time here, the scientists or the God of creation? Light showed up on the earth for the first time at high noon, and God started counting time from that very moment of first impingement of light on the surface of the earth, perpendicular to the surface of the earth at the point of that first impingement. But our current counting of time places the start of the day at a time of pitch darkness midnight. And we call that scientific precision? The first appearance of light on the earth, high noon, not the middle of the night, ushered in the first day ever on the earth. And the Bible calls it correctly to the nearest nanosecond. In this comparison, we can all see that the Bible's account and record of light's first appearance on the earth is accurate to the dot, while the world's was simply a fabrication chosen for convenience and political purposes. Figure 4. The different ages of the earth. The problem has not only been the world. The greater problem has been the believers of God who have refused to use the knowledge God has made available to the world to develop better understanding of the precise truths God had posited for his people on the pages of the Bible. When you glance through the passages of the Bible and overlook phrases like, "and there was evening," and "there was morning," you will fail to pick up the science of God's truths in the Bible. God's direct light graced the face of the earth for the first 3 days of creation in Genesis chapter 1. This was the maiden age of the earth, the perfect earth. And this age of the earth would return to the earth at the end of time as prophesied in the book of Revelations, Revelation 21 verses 1 to 27, and Revelation 22 verses 1 to 5. Here are portions of that passage. I did not see a temple in the city, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. 23. The city does not need the sun or the moon touching on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. 24. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. 25 On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. 26 The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. 27 Nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Revelation 21 verses 22 to 27. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb to down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. 3 No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. For they will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. 5 There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light. And they will reign forever and ever. Revelation 22 verses 1 to 5. At the end of time, there will be no more nights, because there will be no more curses on the earth. The devil is gone forever and would know longer torment humanity. And if there are no nights, time will become an endless continuum that stretches infinitely. This is the eternity the Bible promises believers. When on day 4 of creation, God replaced his direct light with the sun, the moon, and the stars, God continued to shield the earth and all its content by his presence through grace, which constitutes the bulk of God's creation. The devil was on the earth, but the devil could not affect anything on the earth, because the devil and his minions were completely contained by God and tucked away from God's perfect creations. God continued to give his light to the world via the sun, the moon, and the stars. Nevertheless, on day 4 of creation, the heat of the sun was not scorching, like it does in our current world. And there was no rain or any inclement weather conditions to thwart the comfortable living conditions that existed in the world during this period. The world was still perfect, even with the sun replacing the direct light of God. God had perfectly transitioned the earth's reliance on his direct luminance to the radiant energies of the sun, the moon, and the stars, without the earth or anything on the earth losing a beat. This is why the world had missed this information. Most believers and theologians simply gloss over this transition without realizing its significance, thereby missing its impact on science and on our relationship to God and his Christ. Revelation 7 verse 16 is a window through which we can see the conditions on the perfect earth which God had originally created for humanity's perfect habitation. In the following passage, the people of the world who lived a life of faith and obedience to God and his Christ had been washed of their sins and renewed in holiness, so they could live in everlasting blissfulness with God and his Christ. The presence of God will shelter them from all adversities, including the scorching heat from the sun and other adverse weather conditions. That is a window for the world into the holy lives Adam and Eve lived with God at the Garden of Eden before they rebelled against God. Mankind could not derive a true understanding of the life conditions of the holy Adam and holy Eve any other way. Only God gives any human being true access to any event that ancient. Here is that window. These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. 15 Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. 16 Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. 17 For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Revelation 7 verses 15 to 17. The first age of the earth, days 1 to 3 of creation, was characterized by the direct presence of God on the earth. It will actually be accurate to call this age of the earth Christ's first coming to the earth. Jesus Christ was the light that dawned on the earth on day 1 of creation. The Bible confirms this claim in the following passages: John 1 verses 1 to 5, Colossians 1 verses 15 to 20, Acts 17 to 28, Ephesians 4 verses 4 to 6, etc. The second age of the earth seamlessly continued from the first age of the earth. The only difference between the two ages was that while the first age was supported by God's direct presence on the earth, the second age was supported by the sun, the moon, and the stars, with the universe lodged between the earth and God's dwelling place. In both the first age of the earth and the second age of the earth, living conditions in the open earth were perfect that human beings and all the animals of the earth did not have any need for shelters because there was nothing to seek shelter from. God had created perfect living conditions everywhere on the earth and had maintained those conditions through the transition between the two ages. Day 4 of creation was the start of the second age of the earth because on day 4 of creation, God replaced his direct presence on the earth with celestial elements, namely the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything else that resulted from the cataclysmic explosion that we popularly call the Big Bang, Genesis 1 verses 14 to 19. The second age of the earth seamlessly continued the conditions that existed on the earth at the end of day 3 of creation. God had just unfolded the universe over the earth and blocked the earth's view of heaven completely. At the end of day 3 of creation, anyone on the earth could see God with their naked eyes, seated majestically on his throne in heaven because of the infinite size of God. In contrast, by day's end on day 4, that view of heaven was completely blocked by the universe that God put in place on day 4. The moon's reflection of the light of the sun was to point mankind to the reality that the sun and the stars in the universe continually receive their radiant energies directly from God and his Christ, and not from some imagined infinite supply of hydrogen gas within each star. This is the supremacy of God and a demonstration of God's perfect wisdom. God can lead you to illuminating knowledge, or he could lead you to wherever else you convince yourself to go just to avoid God and instead elevate yourself. The expansive universe being placed between the earth and heaven was no minor event. It was the beginning of a new age for the earth, a planet God had created to have eternal existence, just like heaven has eternal existence. The earth is truly in its own class and will never be rivaled by any other celestial creation of God. World scientists have been scouring the entire universe, frantically searching for another Earth to prove that the Bible is wrong. And all of us in the world are cheering them on in the name of the pursuit of knowledge, even though their practice is nothing but absurdity. God was not mistaken, therefore, when he prophesied that all the people of the world will worship the beast. The world has got another thing coming. No one who sets out to discredit God will ever succeed. And believers who quietly cheer for these maddening escapades are walking on slippery slopes. Before the universe came into existence, there was heaven and the earth, Genesis 1 verse 2. And when it is all over at the end of time, there will, once again, be heaven and the earth. Whereas the very first earth had seas, the earth at the end of time will have no seas, but rather an unfettered access to the crystal water of the New Jerusalem. The second age of the age started from day 4 of creation and continued through the days of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, up to their rebellion against God. Everything in the world during the second age of the earth remained perfect because there was no activated evil to mess anything up. Adam and Eve obeyed God's commands and satisfied God completely and enjoyed perfect security in God's continued presence in the world. Then came the rebellion of Adam and Eve against God. And the evil which God had made inert to mankind became instantly activated by mankind's disobedience and was unleashed upon the entire world. Rot, decay, and death set into everything that was in existence in the world. The period from the rebellion of Adam and Eve at the Garden of Eden to the Great Flood constituted the third age of the earth. The third age of the earth was an age of difficulty in the world. Grace was greatly diminished by sin and activated evil. Took up any room vacated by grace in the world. Death had set in, and the world had begun to die. Mankind became more sinful and activated evil continued to accumulate in the world and cause havoc to lives throughout the world. All natural genetics were reconstituted through the activities of activated evil. This all became possible by the withdrawal of grace from within each living thing to the degree predestined by God. The withdrawal of grace created room for activated evil to move in to the extent grace was withdrawn from each living thing. And sinful nature became a norm in the world. The heat of the sun gained in intensity and began to scorch the earth and all of its content, bringing severe and irreversible changes to the world's weather and creating adversities that freely impact all living things on the earth. It is possible that the oscillation of the earth 23 degrees north and 23 degrees south started at this point, thereby creating different seasons of the year. The animals and the plants of the world were all adversely affected, all undergoing genetic mutations that caused all living things to begin to evolve according to God's predestinations. And grace, which is abundantly everywhere in the world and in the universe, monitored, controlled, and generated the desired results. With no rain on the earth since God created the earth, and the heat of the sun now scorching the earth and everything on the earth, life was becoming truly unbearable on the earth. With mankind driven out of the Garden of Eden and forced to farm to support itself, things really got progressively dire, prompting Lamech to prophesy that God may use his son Noah to bring relief to the world. And God did bring relief to mankind by covering over everything sin had tainted. New Earth's surface and enriched soil, regular rain to water the entire Earth's surface and replenish the groundwater, new breeds of animals, new plant stock. And God's renewed grace were given to Noah and his family to start over. God put an end to the third age of the earth by covering the entire earth and everything within the earth, even the highest mountain peaks on the earth, with flood water that lasted almost a year over everything. The flood replaced the surface of the original earth with a new layer of earth throughout, greatly impacting all of Earth's geology. Following the Great Flood, about 105 years after the flood, God divided the Earth's landmass to create the continents that we see on the Earth today, further affecting the Earth's geology, climate patterns, and wind patterns, among other things. The fourth age of the Earth started when Noah's Ark settled back on the surface of the Earth, and all the passengers got out and spread out across the new surface of the Earth. That fourth age of the Earth had continued till this day. And God promised never to destroy all life on the earth with water again. Everything the world scientists use as their references comes from this fourth age of the earth. But the fourth age of the earth does not reflect the harsh conditions on the earth during the third age of the earth, that is the age between the original sin and the destruction of the earth by flood. Nor do the prevailing conditions in this fourth age of the age, in any way whatsoever, reflect the perfect conditions that existed on the earth during the first and second ages of the earth. God did not bring any rains on the earth from the time of the earth's creation until the rain that destroyed the entire life on the whole earth. But the world scientists had made the assumption that everything we see in the world today has always been a part of the world since the earth came into existence. That is short-sightedness, especially. When God presented the entire truth to us in his holy book, the Bible. The world scientists have no way of theorizing or deciding what the first age, the second age, or even the third age of the earth were like, their distinctions and their similarities. As such, no world scientist, or anybody else at that, is in a position to even remotely describe the conditions that existed on the earth on the three previous ages of the earth, aside from the information God gave to us in the Bible, from which I put these things together. Things from those three ages could only be understood through God's account of his creation activities in the Bible. And to those who do not believe God and have shunned his truths, those events would forever remain mysteries. The world scientists can make all the conjectures they want, but none of that would change anything in their favor. I guarantee that. There is a saying in my native African language which says that anyone who is not present at a burial, who decides to unearth the corpse, always starts at the foot position instead of the head because they usually could not tell which is which. That is dead on with the wisdom of the world. People often claim that they know something that they don't because they have sold other lies to everyone before. To continue to reinforce their importance, they continue to manufacture fantasies that are believable. And those whom the fantasies are meant for will continue to eagerly consume them because they are already hooked. That is the current situation between the people of the world and the world scientists, especially now that the powerful governments of the world are madly trying to establish an edge over one another for a bigger slice of the world's fortunes and for more bragging rights. As a result, they are all investing heavily on these scientists to come up with something they could each present to their people to gain the people's loyalty and their additional support. God says that water and the earth were created before anything else in the entire universe. But scientists could not prove how that is possible with God removed from creation. So, they devised a roundabout way that puts the universe first. In their roundabout theories, the universe, through magical transformations and incantations, produced the earth and all the lives that exist on the earth. They branded their science fiction as science and continue to feed that to everyone in the world through government-sponsored programs and school systems. Because they control all the world's resources and all the media outlets, whatever they say things are generally accepted as what things are. But we are all losers by continuing to accept these senseless concoctions without checking them against the truth of the Bible for accuracy. Using these fallacious conclusions as the standards for truth is detrimental to all humanity. Yet nobody seems to care. Everything humanity has experienced in this fourth age of the earth is an experience already tainted by sin. Mankind and all the plants and all the animals on the face of the earth started this fourth age of the earth with a sinful nature. None was any longer the perfect creation which God created during the 6 days of creation in Genesis chapter 1. The biological food chain started at the very beginning of this fourth age of the earth. Animal killing, meat eating, animals preying on other animals, all started at the onset of this fourth age of the earth. Our current world is a world that has been reconfigured to now accommodate the sinful human beings and their untamable desires for selfish pleasures and comfort.